And here we are again. The clock hit midnight, October 1st. Fiscal year 2026 is here.
But the funding isn't. Congress didn't manage to pass the appropriations bills, not even a continuing resolution, a CR, to, keep the lights on temporarily.
Which means, yes, the U.S. federal government is shut down again. First time since that really long one, the 35-day shutdown in 2018-2019.
And I think for you listening, the big question is probably, okay, what stops? Like right now, how am I going to feel this?
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We've sifted through a whole stack of sources on how these shutdowns actually work.
Right.
Our mission is to give you a clear picture, hopefully without overwhelming you, of how this funding lapse hits home. We're talking airport lines, military pay, federal jobs.
And the surprising cost of all this to the economy. It's not cheap.
So the basic mechanism, a shutdown means stopping all non-essential discretionary functions. Let's unpack that because the devil's really in the details.
Okay, so the first thing to grasp is mandatory versus discretionary spending.
Yeah.
Your mandatory stuff, think Social Security, Medicare, VA benefits, that's usually funded longer term.
Yeah.
So those checks, they generally keep coming.
Generally. Okay, but almost everything else the government does relies on that annual discretionary funding.
Exactly. And when that funding lapses, all the functions deemed non-essential just stop immediately.
Let's start with something really tangible. Travel. Airports. What happens there?
Well, the essential people, your air traffic controllers, most of the TSA screeners, they have to work. It's critical for safety.
Okay, so they're on the job.
They are. But, and this is the crucial part, they're working without pay. And that's where things get dicey.
Right, and history gives us a clue here, doesn't it? That 2018-2019 shutdown.
Oh yeah. We saw these huge spikes in what people politely called sick outs. Meaning essential workers, understandably angry and stressed about missing paychecks, didn't come in, called in sick.
And the impact was immediate, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Massive delays. Security checkpoints had to close at major airports. So legally, the system's supposed to run, but the human factor, it throws a huge wrench in the works.
So severe delays seem likely, maybe not a total stop. What if you're waiting on, say, a passport, international travel plans?
Passport offices, they generally stay open, but the processing times, expect those to get much, much longer.
Why is that?
Because a lot of the staff doing the behind-the-scenes work, the processing, the data entry, they're often deemed non-essential. They get furloughed, so everything slows way down.
Okay. Then there's the national parks. That's always a flashpoint, it seems. I remember awful stories last time. Vandalism?
Yeah, that's a key thing we found in the sources. In 2018, 2019, the decision was made to keep parks open, but basically unstaffed.
Which sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It was. Total free-for-all. Reports of widespread damage, trash everywhere, serious vandalism. I mean, people cut down Joshua trees in Joshua Tree National Park. Irreplaceable stuff.
Yeah, what was that?
Well, irresponsible is putting it mildly.
And now, what are people saying this time?
Conservation groups are really pushing for the parks to just be closed if they can't be staffed. They argue it's just too dangerous otherwise.
Especially since staffing's already down.
Exactly. The National Park Service is already estimated to be short-staffed, maybe by 24% or so. Keeping parks open without enough rangers and staff, it's risky for people and the environment.
Are states doing anything?
We are seeing some movement, like Colorado's governor, Jared Polis. He's looking into potentially using state money, limited funds obviously, to keep Rocky Mountain National Park going, especially now during leaf peeping season, which is huge for their local economy.
Interesting state-level workaround. Okay, what about other services? Mail, weather.
Postal Service should be fine. It's mostly self-funded. You'll still get weather forecasts because that's essential. But the background work, maintenance on equipment, upgrades, long-term climate data processing, that gets delayed.
And FEMA, disaster response.
Right, FEMA. Most of their people are exempt, meaning they work through a shutdown. But, and this is a big but, the actual money pot, the disaster relief fund, it's apparently running really low.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. It needs Congress to refill it properly. So FEMA can manage immediate needs, maybe, but the reimbursements to states and local governments for what they spend, those could face serious delays.
So if a hurricane hits, say, Florida, while Congress is gridlocked, Florida might be footing the bill for a while.
That's a huge risk, yeah. A massive financial burden potentially shifted onto state and local governments, at least temporarily.
Wow.
And don't forget the National Flood Insurance Program. That's set to lapse right after September 30th, unless Congress acts separately. That impacts home sales, property owners. It's another layer of uncertainty.
Okay, let's pivot to the people directly impacted. The federal workforce, the military, paychecks. When does the pain actually hit their bank accounts?
For federal employees, whether they're furloughed or working without pay, the first full paycheck they'd likely miss is around October 24th.
And for the military, active duty.
They keep serving, of course. But their first missed pay date would be sooner, around October 15th.
And it's weird, isn't it, that military pay isn't automatically protected during a shutdown?
It's a critical difference, yeah. They actually need Congress to pass a specific law for that, like the Pay Our Troops Act that was proposed for 2026 but didn't get through in time. Without that, their pay gets delayed, just like other federal workers.
That seems wrong.
It definitely puts them in a tough spot.
Yeah.
You're already seeing groups like Navy Federal Credit Union, USAA, making plans for zero-interest loans for their members. It shows just how precarious things get for military families very quickly.
But okay, assuming the shutdown eventually ends, do people get paid back for the time they were furloughed or worked without pay?
Thankfully, yes, for federal employees and the military. There's a law now, the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act of 2019. It guarantees back pay.
That's something, at least.
It is a big deal. But it's important to remember federal contractors. Historically, they are not guaranteed back pay, and that's a huge workforce that often gets overlooked.
Okay, now here's something that feels different this time. The sources mention threats of actual layoffs, not just furloughs, reductions in force, or RAFs.
That is absolutely the big political flashpoint in this particular shutdown. It's unusual. Historically, shutdowns meant furloughs, temporary unpaid leave.
Right.
RIF means you're fired, permanent job loss.
And the administration is linking this directly to the shutdown.
They are. Administration officials have framed it that way. But critics, unions, some Democrats, they're pushing back hard.
How so?
They argue that RIFs are a separate process, that the administration could do them whether the government was open or closed, and that threatening them now is, well, a political tactic, using fear, causing trauma, as some put it.
Politics aside, the threat itself must be causing huge anxiety.
Immense uncertainty. There's already a lawsuit filed trying to block these potential mass layoffs. You think about states like Alaska or Oregon, places with a high percentage of federal workers. This isn't just about a missed paycheck anymore. It's about potentially losing your job entirely. Huge economic stress for those regions.
Wow, okay, shifting again. Safety nets. We said mandatory things like Social Security checks keep coming, so why are people worried about, say, food assistance?
It's because the check might be mandatory, but the services needed to manage the program often aren't. They rely on discretionary funding.
Explain that a bit more.
Okay, so Social Security benefits continue. But what if your grandma loses her card and needs a replacement? Or someone's applying for the first time and needs their eligibility verified?
Yeah.
The office that does that, likely closed or running on a skeleton crew.
So the money's there, but the system to access it or manage it breaks down.
Precisely. We saw this back in the 95-96 shutdown. Estimates were like 10,000 Medicare applicants were turned away each day temporarily. Same with the IRS. Things slow way down. Tax refunds get delayed. Loan approvals that need IRS verification, like mortgages, those got held up back in 2013.
And our sources highlighted one program as particularly vulnerable right now, WIC, Women, Infants, and Children.
Yes, WIC is in a really tough spot because of the timing. This shutdown hits right at the start of the fiscal year. WIC depends heavily on newly appropriated funds.
So it runs out of money fast.
Potentially, yes, very fast. If a shutdown lasts more than, say, a week or so, WIC families could be immediately at risk. It really depends on whether individual states have managed to build up any contingency funds. Many don't have much.
That's frightening. What about SNAP, food stamps? That's a much bigger program.
SNAP funding itself is mandatory. But again, it's the distribution that gets complicated. In past shutdowns, Congress usually only authorized benefits for about 30 days after the shutdown started.
I remember hearing about that in 2019. They had to pay benefits out early.
Exactly. They had to rush February 2019 benefits out in January to meet that deadline. It caused a lot of confusion for recipients trying to budget and a headache for administrators. It just shows how even these essential safety nets operate on shaky ground during a funding gap.
The whole system relies on those administrative bits working smoothly.
It really does. They're the unseen gears that keep the whole machine running.
Okay, let's tackle the biggest, maybe most counterintuitive piece, the cost. Does shutting down the government actually save taxpayers money?
The data we looked at says absolutely not. It's a resounding no. Shutdowns are incredibly expensive.
More expensive than just staying open.
Way more expensive. It's maybe the costliest way imaginable not to save money. Think about this. The 2013 shutdown cost $2.5 billion just in back pay. That's paying people for hours they didn't work because they were furloughed.
Paying people not to work. Plus lost fees and things, I assume.
Millions in lost fee collections, penalty interest payments. It adds up. But the hit to the wider economy, that's even bigger.
How big are we talking?
The Congressional Budget Office estimated the 2018-2019 shutdown cut U.S. gross domestic product, the GDP, by $11 billion.
$11 billion. Wow.
And here's the really grim part. They calculated $3 billion of that loss was permanent, never recovered, gone.
$3 billion just vanished from the economy.
Vanished. A Senate report looked at the last three shutdowns, 2013, 2018, 2019, and found they wasted nearly $4 billion in taxpayer money altogether. Just wasted.
So how does that happen? Where does that money disappear from? Consumer spending?
That's a huge part of it, yes. We looked at data on something called personal consumer expenditures, or PCE, basically household spending.
It drops off a cliff.
Pretty much. When hundreds of thousands of federal workers suddenly have zero income, they stop spending money immediately on non-essentials. Nationally, PCE dropped by $4.4 billion during the 2013 shutdown, and a whopping $10.0 billion during the 2018-19 one.
And certain areas get hit harder, I imagine, like D.C.?
Oh, definitely. The D.C. area saw a huge contraction, like a 5 percentage point bigger drop in PCE than the rest of the country in 2013. Makes sense, given the concentration of federal workers.
So if people stop spending, which businesses feel it the most?
Consistently, across shutdowns, the sources point to one industry above all others: restaurants.
Really? Why them specifically?
Well, eating out is one of the first discretionary things people cut when money gets tight. In 2013, the restaurant industry accounted for something like 58% of the total national loss in consumer spending. That was $2.6 billion lost just for them.
And unlike maybe delaying buying a car, that restaurant meal, that sale is lost forever for that local business.
Exactly. It's not deferred spending, it's just gone. We also saw clear data showing sales dropped sharply at places like stores on government and military bases. And importantly, those sales didn't just bounce back the week after the shutdown ended. The loss appeared permanent.
Any impact on small businesses specifically?
Huge impact. During the 2018-2019 shutdown, small businesses took a massive hit estimated at $4 billion in losses. That was about 40% of the total reduction in consumer spending during that period. They are incredibly vulnerable.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. We've covered the basics, the mechanics of mandatory versus discretionary.
The real strain on essential services like air travel, even if they technically stay open.
This new, frankly, alarming threat of actual layoffs hanging over federal workers, adding a whole new layer of fear.
The shaky ground under crucial safety nets like WIC, especially with this timing.
And finally, this ironclad data showing shutdowns don't save money, they cost billions, permanently damaging the economy.
And the root cause is simple, fundamentally.
Right.
It's a failure to pass the basic funding bills mixed with political brinkmanship. Both sides using the deadline for leverage on other issues.
While communities, businesses, vulnerable families, and the economy itself just absorb the damage. Billions of dollars of damage.
Fine.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty stark question, I think. If the data is so clear year after year, shutdown after shutdown, if we know they cost money, hurt the economy, hit vulnerable people the hardest, why does this keep happening? What is the incentive structure in Washington that allows this incredibly costly, damaging pattern, including relying on these last-minute stopgap CRs all the time to repeat itself?
What political gain outweighs that much tangible economic pain?
Something to think about as this unfolds. It's a tough question with no easy answers.
Indeed. Well, that's our deep dive for today.
Thanks for joining us. We'll keep tracking this, and we'll see you next time.